Today is, according to some, part 5 of our series on Let's Talk About Hell. It may be part 6. I don't really know, but it's the next part, whatever that is. So we've been looking at different words used in the Bible for the word hell, because obviously hell is an English word, and hell is one word that serves as a catch-all word for several different Greek words. Tartarus gets translated hell. Hades gets translated hell. We looked at Hades last week. And I think the most entertaining part of last week, the most interesting piece, is Hades is a Greek word that has a whole Greek mythology behind it before the New Testament starts using it. Before Paul or Jesus use it, it's being used in Greek mythology. And so a Greek would hear the word Hades and think, oh, underworld, cross the river Styx on a boat, put a gold coin under your tongue, pay the man to carry you across, and the king of Hades, whose name is Hades, carries, of all things, a pitchfork. And there's this whole Greek mythology, some of which trickled into Christianity. You know, the devil with the horns and a pitchfork, that's just made up stuff. There's nothing, the idea that Satan or that the devil is in charge of hell, that's Greek. That's not Christian or Jewish. It has no place in Jewish or Christian theology. So we looked at Hades last week, and if you weren't here or if you weren't there and didn't get a chance to watch it, I really do encourage you to go back and give it a half an hour, because it's got some very interesting and important material. What we're going to look at tonight is, for me, perhaps the most interesting and important session of this whole series. We're going to look at the word that Jesus used, and every time he used it. Jesus spoke of Hades once, maybe twice. Jesus spoke this word a dozen times. By the way, I can't say a dozen times without pausing and saying this. If anybody tells you, because they will, because I've been told this 10,000 times, if anybody tells you Jesus talks more about hell than he does about heaven, malarkey. Malarkey. He does not. Not even close. He refers to hell a dozen times, and of that dozen times, half of them are the same time that Matthew records, and then Mark records it, or Luke records it. It's parallel. Jesus actually refers to hell maybe a half a dozen times. We're going to look at all of them tonight. And the word he uses is the word Gehenna. I'm going to teach you about Gehenna tonight. First of all, it is a proper name of a real place, a valley outside Jerusalem. It is a valley where early on in the story of Israel, not long after they came into the Promised Land, they abandoned the worship of Yahweh and embraced the worship of this tribal god that was already in the region called Molech. And Molech demanded the sacrifice of children. And in one case, there actually was a metal idol of Molech built with a gaping open mouth, with arms on levers and a flame in the mouth, and the people would bring their babies and put them into the hands of Molech, and the priest would crank the lever and the wheels would roll and the arm would and throw the baby into the mouth of this idol to be consumed in order to appease the gods. I could go off tangent or on a tangent. I could chase a rabbit trail for about an hour right now and say a whole lot of Christianity, including a lot of Christianity that you are familiar with, has embraced that pagan idea about how you relate to God. That God is one who must be appeased. That he is one who must be satisfied before he will bless you or before he will lift curse off of you. And you have this whole theology that develops around Jesus, that he paid the price. That he sacrificed himself to God so that we wouldn't have to be sacrificed to God. Folks, that's paganism. That's not Christianity. A Christianity that sings Jesus paid it all is a Christianity at least tinged by pagan understanding of how we relate to God. Christian understanding, the biblical understanding, the verse I go to all the time, 2 Corinthians 5:19, God was in Christ reconciling the world to himself, not counting people's sins against them. But that was a little rabbit trail. They offered their children to Molech as an appeasement. So I'm going to read you some scriptures from the Old Testament, beginning with King Ahaz. If you don't know anything about King Ahaz, he was a very bad king. One of the worst, maybe the worst. This is from 2 Chronicles 28, verse 1. Ahaz was 20 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 16 years in Jerusalem. And he did not do what was right in the eyes of the Lord, as his father David had done, actually his ancestor David. But he walked in the ways of the kings of Israel. He even made metal images for the Baals. And he made offerings in the valley of the son of Hinnom. Gehenna. The valley of the son of Hinnom. That's Gehenna. And burned his sons as an offering. The king of Israel burned his children as an offering, according to the abominations of the nations whom the Lord drove out before the people of Israel. So here's the king doing these abominable things in this valley called Gehenna, the valley of the son of Hinnom. So Ahaz dies, and his son Hezekiah comes along. And if you read the story of Hezekiah, he was a wonderful king, godly king, a reformer. And then he has a son named Manasseh. Now Manasseh takes up where Grandpa left off. It's like a pendulum swinging back and forth. Good king, bad king, good king, bad king. Grandson taking after Grandpa in a bad way. So Manasseh becomes the king. You got Ahaz, bad guy, offers children as human sacrifices in the valley of Gehenna. Hezekiah, good guy, tears down all the bad statues, restores true worship. His son, Manasseh, bad guy. Here's what it says, 2 Chronicles 33, beginning in verse 1. When I read this first sentence, I realize, oh, we already have a problem. Manasseh was 12 years old when he began to reign. And he reigned 55 years in Jerusalem. And he did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, according to the abominations of the nations whom the Lord drove out before the people of Israel. For he rebuilt the high places that his father Hezekiah had broken down. And he erected altars to the Baals and made Asherah. We're all grown-ups here. An Asherah pole is it's a big penis that a fertility goddess was worshipped around this, big giant tall penis, and it was heathen. And he worshiped all the host of heaven and served them. And he burned his sons as an offering in the valley of the son of Hinnom, and used fortune-telling and omens and sorcery, and dealt with mediums and with necromancers, and he did much evil in the sight of the Lord, provoking him to anger. Manasseh has a son named Josiah. Josiah, a great reformer, a man of God, a righteous king, perhaps the most righteous king. Jeremiah begins prophesying. The first part of Jeremiah you read, he begins prophesying during the reign of Josiah. Josiah has a son. Let's see, that would be Manasseh's grandson, named Jehoiakim, who is, guess what? A wicked king. And Jeremiah prophesies against him and some of the things he's doing. And this is what the bulk of Jeremiah is about. He says, dude, it's all going to hell in a handbasket. There's no turning back now. We're toast. We're about to be invaded. Babylon, and there's a fascinating story, political story behind it if you want to dig in and look. Babylon is this superpower. Jehoiakim aligns first, Israel aligns first with Babylon, and then they go, wait, Egypt is mighty powerful. Let's line up with Egypt. And then war breaks out and Egypt loses power and everything goes wrong for Jerusalem, and then Babylon is at the door. Jerusalem is about to be overrun. You've heard of the Babylonian captivity. You've heard of the 70 years in Babylon, Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. All of this happens after Babylon levels Jerusalem. Listen to what Jeremiah says. Chapter 7, verse 30. I want you to pay close attention to the language Jeremiah uses about what is in store for Jerusalem. For the sons of Judah have done evil in my sight, declares the Lord. They have set their detestable things in the house that is called by my name, in the temple, to defile it. And they have built the high places of Topheth. That's important. The high places, altars, the high places of Topheth. They have built the high places of Topheth, which is in the valley of the son of Hinnom, to burn their sons and their daughters in the fire. God says, which I did not command, nor did it even enter my mind. I love that line from God. It's like, I didn't even think of such a thing. Therefore, this is what I want you to hear. Therefore, behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when it will no longer be called Topheth or the valley of the son of Hinnom, Gehenna, but it will be called the Valley of Slaughter. For they will bury in Topheth, in Gehenna, they will bury in Topheth because there is no room elsewhere. Now by now, Topheth has been an on again, off again. Gehenna has been an on again, off again place of a curse. Nobody even go there, or let's go set up some idols and worship there, back and forth. But he says, when Babylon gets done with you, there's not even going to be enough place to bury people in the cemeteries in town, in the hillsides, in the valleys. They're going to bury them in this accursed place. Let me read it to you again. Therefore, behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when it will no longer be called Topheth, or the valley of the son of Hinnom, but the valley of slaughter. For they will bury in Topheth, because there is no room elsewhere. And the dead bodies of this people will be food for the birds of the air and for the beasts of the earth, and none will frighten them away. I don't know if you've ever been to Gettysburg, or if you've ever watched documentaries on it or read stories on it, but the Battle of Gettysburg and the Battle of Antietam, these massive battles where, you know, thousands upon thousands died. And then the soldiers, then the soldiers left. They're going on to the next battle. The armies leave, and they leave the dying, the wounded that they can't save, and the dead in the fields. And a day or two later, there are actual photographs of this from Gettysburg. A day or two later, there are wild hogs eating the entrails of soldiers who are still alive, who've been left for dead. There are ravens and buzzards eating away at the faces and the flesh. This is the consequence of warfare. This is what Jeremiah is describing is going to happen to Jerusalem. And the dead bodies of this people will be food for the birds of the air and for the beasts of the earth, and none will frighten them away. And I will silence in the cities of Judah and in the streets of Jerusalem the voice of mirth and the voice of gladness, the voice of the bridegroom, the voice of the bride, for the land shall become a waste. I want you to notice now, Gehenna has become a prophetic place of destruction. The valley of slaughter. It has come to represent the aftermath of invasion. You with me so far? Now I want you to compare everything I've just read to you about Gehenna and Jerusalem at large to the language of Jesus in Matthew 24 when he predicts the destruction of Jerusalem by Rome. And if you remember, we just did a whole series on this. Matthew 24 is not about the end of the world, the end times. It's about the downfall, the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70. And the same thing that happened to Jerusalem under Babylon is going to happen to Jerusalem under Rome. And Jesus is torn up about it, and he's warning people about it, and he's calling them to repent and to avoid this. And he says in Matthew 24, verse 28, wherever the corpse is, there the vultures will gather. Okay, back to Jeremiah. I read to you from chapter 7. I'm jumping forward now to chapter 19 of Jeremiah, picking up the same idea. Jeremiah 19, verse 6. Therefore, behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when this place shall no more be called Topheth, or the valley of the son of Hinnom, but the valley of slaughter. This is exactly what he said in chapter 7. And in this place I will make void the plans of Judah and Jerusalem, and will cause their people to fall by the sword before their enemies and by the hand of those who seek their life. And I will give their dead bodies for food to the birds of the air and the beasts of the earth. And I will make this city a horror, a thing to be hissed at. Everyone who passes by it will be horrified and will hiss because of all its wounds. And I will make them inhabitants of Jerusalem. Listen to this. And I will make them eat the flesh of their sons and daughters. I have to pause there for a minute, because we think, how abominable. And yet these are the same people who were sacrificing their sons and their daughters to a false god. Josephus, who was a survivor of the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70, writes in his book, The War of the Jews, he writes that food became so scarce in Jerusalem, besieged for 3.5 years by Rome, that mothers boiled their children and ate them to survive. How horrible a situation. Jeremiah said, I will make them eat the flesh of their sons and their daughters, and everyone shall eat the flesh of his neighbor in the siege and in the distress with which their enemies and those who seek their life afflict them. Men shall bury in Topheth, because there will be no place else to bury. Thus will I do to this place, declares the Lord, and to its inhabitants, making the city like Topheth, Gehenna. The houses of Jerusalem and the houses of the kings of Judah, all the houses on whose roofs offerings have been offered to all the host of heaven, and drink offerings have been poured out to other gods, shall be defiled like the place of Topheth. And that's the last mention of Gehenna in the Old Testament. Work with me here. Gehenna, Old Testament, starts off a bad place, pagan, child sacrifice, abominable, ends up devastatingly horrible place of the consequence of annihilation, of war that wipes out the city. In America, if you know American history at all, we say Antietam, and people that are somewhat into the Civil War instantly think of the bloodiest single day in American history. 30,000 casualties in one day. 30,000. Let's take all of Denison and kill everybody. That's what happened in this little beautiful rural country valley and woods in Antietam. And so Antietam, if someone were to say it's going to be Antietam all over again, that would be, nobody knows history anymore, so let's do it like this. It's going to be 9/11 all over again. Oh, wait, what? You're talking about attacks from the outside, horrible things happening, innocent lives. Yeah, except make that exponentially more severe. That's what the word Gehenna becomes in the Jewish mindset. And so it becomes a place where no one builds their homes. There are no subdivisions being built up there that can look over across the valley into the beauty of Jerusalem. It becomes a place where you throw out your dead dogs and where you dump your trash. And there's stench and fire. It essentially becomes the city dump. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm just redneck enough, country boy enough, to have grown up going with Dad to dump our barrels of trash at the town dump. It was not a landfill. It was a dump. It stunk to high heaven. And as a boy, I was always intrigued. I wanted to go, climbing around in the trash to see if I could find something cool. One man's trash is another man's treasure. But man, it stunk. It stunk so bad, and there were two things that I can guarantee you, every time we went out there were two things that were always there. There was a fire that never went out. It was just always burning. Drive by at night, there's the glow of the embers, there's a fire going, and there were always, without question, maggots. There were worms. A place of uncleanness. Gehenna, I said all of that to say this. Gehenna then, in Old Testament Jewish mindset, has nothing to do with hell. Has nothing to do with a place of eternal punishment. It has everything to do with the consequences of a life not following after God. By the time we get to Jesus, what is called Second Temple Judaism by historians, by the time we get to Jesus, some of the rabbis started picking up Gehenna and saying, this is what your afterlife is going to be like if you don't straighten up and fly right. An analogy, a symbol. With all of that as our background, we are now going to look at every single time Jesus speaks of Gehenna, which very unfortunately gets translated in our English Bibles as hell. No. I just can't say no enough about that. No. Matthew 5, verse 22. But I say to you that this is in the Sermon on the Mount. This is when he's saying, be good to each other. Or in the words of the brilliant theologians Bill and Ted, be excellent to each other. And I could go off on another rabbit trail that honestly, I may preach on this tomorrow, that honestly, really and truly, the thing Jesus calls us to do is be excellent to each other. That's pretty much it. I think I am going to preach on that tomorrow. So in that context where Jesus is saying, if someone strikes you on the right cheek, give them your left cheek also. Let them hit that too. If someone takes your cloak, give them your shirt. If someone forces you to walk a mile, walk with them 2 miles. This language that Mahatma Gandhi ends up borrowing, and then later Martin Luther King Jr. end up borrowing about non-violence and non-aggressive resistance to evil. In that context, he says, but I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. Whoever insults his brother will be liable to the council, to the Sanhedrin, to court. And whoever says, you fool, which in Hebrew, in Aramaic, is a much stronger. My brother says, you fool, all the time to me. He's not going to be accursed for that. This is to say it with hatred. Raka. Whoever says, you fool, English version, will be liable to the hell of fire. No. Will be liable to the town dump. Will be liable to an accursed life. we'll be liable to nothing going right. We'll be liable to your whole world collapsing. I have to tell you, oh my goodness, what a brilliant illustration just entered into my mind. This just happened to me Friday. Stormy and I were driving to Wimberley, Texas to see my son Jay and Sarah and grandkids and take some gifts down to them. And I stopped to go to the bathroom at a McDonald's south of Dallas. And as I'm getting out of the car, my door, this is how hard my door hit the car next to me. That was it. I get out, it was nothing. Shut the door, I start to go in, and this guy jumps out of the car. And I can't say in church or on audio what he said to me. But, you blankety blank blank, you hit my car. I said, I'm so sorry. I'm very sorry. I didn't mean to do that. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Well, you blankety blank, you better watch what you're doing. I said, I'm sorry. And here's something I learned a long time ago about relationship. I'm sorry doesn't cut it. It doesn't even mean anything. Will you forgive me is where you take it. So I said, I'm really sorry, sir. Will you forgive me for hitting your car? No! Just get out of here. And inside me rose up this urge to just smack the guy. He was being 5,000 times more aggressive and verbally abusive than my car had been abusive to his car. And instead, I said, okay, I will. I'm sorry. And I walked off. And when I came back, I told Stormy that I actually felt pity for that man, because he's got something going on in his life. Either something has already gone on in his life or something is going on in his life right now that's a whole lot worse than his car getting bumped. So in spite of all that, I had compassion for the guy. And he wasn't there when I got back. If he was, I was actually going to talk to him and say, hey buddy, are you okay? Is there anything I can do for you? Jesus tells us to be good to one another, to be excellent to one another. And if we don't, our lives are going to end up like that guy whose car I bumped. Miserable, a trash bin on fire. Second place Jesus uses it, also in Matthew 5, verse 29. If your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away, for it is better that you lose one of your members than your whole body be thrown into Gehenna. Translates hell. It's a hell of a difference, isn't it? I mean, if it's like, if your right eye offends you, take it. First of all, Jesus was not being literal there either. But if your right eye offends you, take it out. It's better for you to live the rest of your life with your right eye gone than your whole body be thrown into the trash dump. Is different than with your whole body being thrown into everlasting, flaming, torturous fire from God. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away, for it is better to lose one of your members than your whole body go into Gehenna. Matthew 10:28. Do not fear those who kill the body but cannot kill the soul. Rather, fear him who can destroy both soul and body in Gehenna. And so Gehenna starts taking on a little bit of this afterlife idea. Matthew 18 is again Jesus saying, if your eye causes you to sin, it's better to enter life with one eye than with two eyes be thrown into the fires of Gehenna. Just a couple more. And I'm coming down the home stretch right now, but what I'm about to read to you is super important. Matthew 23, verse 15. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you travel across sea and land to make a single proselyte, and when he becomes a proselyte, you make him twice as much a child of Gehenna as yourselves. And this, also from Matthew chapter 23, where Jesus is just ragging on the hypocritical religious leaders. You serpents, you brood of vipers. We say brood of vipers, and it doesn't sound so bad. This literally is the Aramaic equivalent to sons of bitches. It just is. It's just a term you use when you're really ticked off with somebody. Jesus, essentially, if we were going to accurately translate this, he would say, you snakes, you sons of bitches, you brood of vipers, how are you to escape being sentenced to Gehenna? Okay, this is what I want to try to communicate. Lordy, I hope I can get this across. Jesus' life and ministry and teaching from essentially the year 30 to the year 33, let's say. He ministers for 3.5 years. During that time, the backdrop, the canvas on which he paints, is the impending doom of Jerusalem. In one generation, Jerusalem is going to collapse. The temple's going to fall, not one stone be left upon another. In Matthew 24, Jesus says that. I say to you, this generation shall not pass until all these things have been fulfilled. That's the background on which he painted his teaching. It's always there. So when he tells a bunch of his parables, which I don't have time to get into tonight, but when he tells a bunch of his parables, if you look closely, what's really behind them is Jerusalem's about to fall because it has rejected the Messiah and embraced Rome instead. So Matthew 23, you bunch of snakes, you brood of vipers, how are you to escape being sentenced to Gehenna? Woe to you, scribes, Pharisees, hypocrites, for you build the tombs of the prophets and you decorate the monuments of the righteous, saying, if we had lived in the day of our fathers, we would have not taken part with them shedding the blood of the prophets. Thus you witness against yourself that you are sons of those who murdered the prophets. Fill up then the measure of your fathers, you serpents, you brood of vipers. How are you to escape being sentenced to Gehenna? Therefore, I send you prophets and wise men and scribes, some of whom you will kill and crucify, some of whom you will flog in your synagogues and persecute from town to town, which is exactly what happened with the apostles, so that on you may come all the righteous blood shed on earth, from the blood of righteous Abel to the blood of Zechariah, the son of Berechiah, whom you murdered between the sanctuary and the altar. Truly, I say to you, all these things will come upon this generation. Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to it. How often would I have gathered your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, and you would not. And lo, your house is left to you desolate. And the language he uses is Gehenna. Sentenced to Gehenna. Every time Jesus talks about Gehenna, the backdrop, the canvas, is the impending destruction of Jerusalem by Rome. None of these texts describe a literal underworld of unending, eternal torture. None of it. All of them simply describe the consequences of a life lived away from God. Does that mean Jesus wasn't referring to the afterlife at all in these texts? No, he was, clearly. He wasn't referring to some literal place where God tortures people for eternity. He was referring to how in this life and the life to come. Let me state this carefully. I should have written this out. In this life and the life to come, until we yield to the love of God, our lives are hell. And that's where we'll end tonight, and we'll pick up next time talking about this phrase in the Bible, eternal fire. Thank you for being there and for being there.